Days before I started my new job, the company canceled my offer with no explanation. I later found out my sister had sent false emails to HR claiming I had criminal issues, all to teach me humility. A bit of background first. I, 31 male, have been estranged from my sister, 33, for about 5 years. We had a massive fallout over something I still can't fully wrap my head around, but it boils down to her actions that completely upended my life. Growing up, my relationship with my sister was always a bit rocky, but I chalked it up to normal sibling rivalry. We were only 2 years apart, so we were often lumped together in everything. School activities, family gatherings, even friends. I looked up to her in many ways. She was always the more outgoing one with a magnetic personality that drew people to her. In contrast, I was the quieter, more reserved sibling, content with staying in the background. Despite our differences, we had good moments playing games as kids, going on family vacations, and even sharing secrets during those rare times when we got along. But as we got older, things started to shift. She became more competitive, always wanting to one-up me. In high school, if I got an A on the test, she had to get an A+. If I made the basketball team, she would brag about being the star of her track team. At first, it didn't bother me much. I figured it was just her way of pushing herself. But over time, it started feeling less like sibling rivalry and more like something darker. She began to undermine me in subtle ways, making snide comments about my choices or downplaying my achievements. When I got accepted into a good college, she made it seem like it wasn't a big deal, even though she had struggled to get into hers. Our relationship became more strained as the years went on. I began to notice that she thrived on attention, and if the spotlight wasn't on her, she found ways to steal it. This dynamic followed us into adulthood, where I tried to distance myself from the constant competition, but she always found a way to drag me back in. Even though I tried to maintain a civil relationship, the underlying tension never really went away. I think a part of me always hoped that we could repair whatever was broken, that maybe one day we could be close like some siblings are. But after what she did to me, I knew that day would never come. It started when I was about to start a new job, a position I had been working towards for years. This wasn't just any job. It was a coveted role in a highly competitive field, the kind of opportunity people dream of but rarely get. I had poured my heart and soul into getting to this point. Countless late nights, networking, extra certifications, internships, you name it, I did it. This job was supposed to be the big break I needed to finally establish myself and build the career I had worked tirelessly for since college. I was excited, probably more excited than I had been in a long time. Everything seemed to be falling into place. My sister, however, didn't seem to share in my excitement. Looking back, there were small signs in the days leading up to my start date. Snide comments here and there, sarcastic jabs disguised as jokes. She'd say things like, "Don't get too comfortable. You know these things never last," or "I hope you can handle the pressure. Not everyone can." At the time, I brushed them off, telling myself she was just being her usual self, always looking for a way to bring me down a peg. I didn't think much of it. That was until I got a call from the HR department of the company just days before I was supposed to begin. The tone of the woman on the phone was cold, formal. Nothing like the enthusiastic voices I had heard during the interview process. She told me in no uncertain terms that the company had decided to rescind the offer. My stomach dropped. I couldn't understand what was happening. I asked her why, practically begging for an explanation. She hesitated for a moment before finally telling me that they had received an alarming email from someone claiming to be a concerned family member. The email, she said, had raised serious concerns about my character and past behavior. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. When I asked for more details, she told me that the email outlined a series of lies, claims that I had a long history of substance abuse, that I had been in and out of rehab, that I had stolen money from my own family to fuel an addiction. It even said I had a criminal record related to these issues, which was absolutely untrue. Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut. I had never struggled with addiction, never stolen anything in my life, and certainly didn't have a criminal record. My entire body went numb as I realized the gravity of the situation. The HR woman went on to explain that given the nature of the accusations and the seriousness of the position, the company had no choice but to withdraw the offer. There was no room for negotiation, no chance to clear my name. The decision was final. They had already moved on to the next candidate. After the call ended, I sat there in shock, unable to process what had just happened. How could someone make such claims about me? Who would even do such a thing? I was racking my brain trying to figure out where this could have come from when the thought hit me like a freight train. My sister. She was the only one who had the kind of personal knowledge that was twisted and warped in that email. And deep down, I knew she was the type to pull something like this if she felt like I needed to be taken down a notch. My immediate reaction was to confront her. I drove to her apartment, storming inside without even knocking. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, anger coursing through every part of me. When I confronted her, the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She didn't deny it. In fact, she didn't even seem surprised that I had figured it out. Her response was as cold as it was infuriating. She admitted to sending the email, but in her mind, she wasn't at fault. I was just trying to help, she said, like that made any sense at all. When I asked her why on earth she would do something so cruel, she just shrugged and said, "You were getting too arrogant about it. You needed a dose of humility. You're not as special as you think you are." I was floored. Arrogant, I wasn't being arrogant. I was excited, proud even. After all those years of struggling and working hard, I finally had something to show for it. And instead of being happy for me, instead of supporting me like family should, she had decided to rip it all away. She had sabotaged me, ruined my reputation with that company, and destroyed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, all because she thought I needed to be humbled. I demanded an apology. She just laughed. "You'll thank me one day," she said dismissively, like this was some sort of lesson I was supposed to learn. I remember staring at her dumbfounded, realizing that the person standing in front of me wasn't someone I could ever trust again. She didn't care about what she had done. To her, this was no big deal. She shrugged it off as if losing a career-defining job was something I should just get over. But I couldn't just get over it. That job wasn't just another gig. It was my future. The dream I had worked so hard to achieve was ripped away from me in an instant, and the person responsible for it didn't feel an ounce of remorse. I walked out of her apartment that day and never looked back. From that moment on, I cut contact with her. My parents, while initially sympathetic to my side, began urging me to forgive her over time. According to them, family is everything, and they couldn't bear the idea of us being estranged. I, however, couldn't move past the betrayal. It wasn't just a job, it was that she intentionally tried to wreck my life, then didn't care. That's not someone I want around me, let alone at one of the most important days of my life, my wedding. Fast forward a few years, and I met my now wife, 29F. We got engaged after 3 years of dating, and the wedding planning began. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. While they were happy for me, they constantly pushed for reconciliation with my sister. They wanted me to invite her to the wedding despite everything. They even pulled the "she's family" card every chance they got. My fiancé was supportive of my decision not to invite her, understanding that this was my choice. Still, my parents kept pressuring me. Eventually, I had enough, and I told them straight up that I wasn't going to invite her, and if that meant they didn't want to come, then I'd understand. I thought they had finally gotten the message, because after some back and forth, they said they respected my decision. I knew they were disappointed, but I didn't want to dwell on it. My focus was on my future wife and the life we were building together. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything was perfect until it wasn't. We were in the middle of taking pictures when one of my cousins came running up to me saying he had bad news. I could tell from the look on his face that something was seriously wrong. Sure enough, when I went to the entrance of the venue there, they were my parents and my sister all dressed up like they were invited. I was fuming. My blood boiled, and I could barely keep it together. They had gone behind my back, completely disregarding my boundaries, and brought her to my wedding. My sister had this smug look on her face like she knew she was causing a scene and didn't care. My parents tried to act all innocent, saying things like, "We just wanted to make things right, and it's your wedding. You can't exclude family." I couldn't believe they were actually trying to pull this on my big day. Without hesitation, I told them to leave. The sight of my sister standing there at my wedding after everything she had done was too much. My parents stood by her, clearly complicit in this attempted reconciliation. I had made it clear that my sister wasn't welcome, and if they couldn't respect that, they didn't need to come either. Yet there they were, thinking they could steamroll through the boundaries I had set. They refused. My sister began making a scene, her voice escalating as she accused me of being dramatic, clinging to a grudge, and overreacting to something she considered insignificant. She acted as if the years of betrayal and sabotage were nothing but a trivial misunderstanding. The tension in the air grew palpable, and I could feel the weight of judgment from some of the guests who had started noticing the commotion. Despite her attempt to make me out as unreasonable, I stood my ground. I wasn't about to let her ruin the most important day of my life. This wasn't the time to cave under pressure, especially not after all the hurt and manipulation she had caused. My parents tried to mediate, pushing me to let it go for the sake of family, but I couldn't. The boundaries I had set were hard-earned, and this was yet another instance of them trying to bulldoze over them. Years of resentment built up in my chest as I pulled out my phone and dialed the police. Calling the cops on my own family wasn't something I ever imagined doing, but I knew I had to do it. I explained that uninvited guests were attempting to crash my wedding, and within minutes the police arrived. Seeing the officers walk up to us felt both surreal and relieving. My wedding had already been tainted by this confrontation, but at least now it could be handled. I had expected this to be a brief, awkward exchange, something the officers could smooth over quickly so I could move on with my day. They approached with calm professionalism and asked my parents and sister to leave. My parents were reluctant, but seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation. My sister, however, was a different story. Instead of complying, she dug her heels in, arguing with the officers and refusing to leave. The volume of her voice rose, and she began making a spectacle of herself. Her refusal to comply only escalated the situation, drawing even more unwanted attention from my guests. At that point, things took an unexpected turn. One of the officers, after speaking into his radio, approached my sister with a more serious demeanor. It wasn't just about her refusing to leave anymore. When they asked her for identification, I could sense something had shifted. There was a long pause as they ran her information, and the tension in the air thickened. As it turned out, my sister had an outstanding warrant for her arrest. I had no idea, and judging by the stunned look on my parents' faces, they didn't either. Apparently, she had been involved in some sort of fraud scheme a few years ago, scamming multiple people out of money using fake identities. What I had assumed was just a family dispute suddenly transformed into something much more serious. The officers moved quickly, placing her in handcuffs as she protested and struggled. She tried to maintain her defiance, but it was clear that this situation had spiraled far beyond her control. I stood there watching as they led her towards the police car, her face a mixture of shock and rage. My parents were frantic, pleading with the officers to let her go, but their words fell on deaf ears. When my father physically tried to intervene and my mother grabbed onto my sister, things escalated even further. The officers warned them to step back, but they didn't listen. In their desperation, they made things worse. What should have been a simple ejection from the premises turned into an arrest for obstructing justice. Both of my parents were handcuffed as well, their pleas drowned out by the chaos unfolding around us. I stood there watching as all three of them, my sister, my mother, and my father, were loaded into police cars. It was surreal seeing them carted off in front of my wedding guests, all because they couldn't respect my boundaries. A mix of emotions flooded through me. I wasn't surprised. Not really. After everything my family had put me through, it almost felt inevitable that this would be the outcome. It was as though the years of manipulation, betrayal, and deceit had culminated in this moment of public reckoning. Standing there, surrounded by friends and loved ones who had come to support us, I felt a strange mix of guilt and disappointment. Guilt that our special day had turned into a disaster for everyone involved, and disappointment that yet again my family had taken something from me. I stepped forward and with a shaky breath told the guests that the wedding wouldn't be going ahead. Apologizing felt like the right thing to do, though I wasn't even sure what I was apologizing for. Was it for the spectacle for my family's actions, or for the fact that we had invited everyone here only to send them away? I didn't know. All I knew was that I felt lost, unsure of how to navigate the wreckage my family had left behind. I don't know how to move ahead with this. Everything I had envisioned for my fiancé and me for our future together now seemed overshadowed by the chaos my family had unleashed. It wasn't just about rescheduling or salvaging the day anymore. It was about picking up the emotional pieces left behind. How do you move forward when the people who should support you are the ones constantly dragging you down? Update 1. A few days after the wedding, things had settled down, but the aftermath of the drama still created a lot of tension. My partner and I were trying to move on to reclaim the joy that had been stolen from us. But my parents, now out on bail, had been blowing up my phone. Their relentless messages were a constant reminder of the chaos that had just unfolded. Voicemails piled up, and long guilt-tripping texts flooded my inbox. My mom's messages were particularly infuriating, filled with phrases like, "We were just trying to help, and you didn't have to call the cops on us." It was as if they were still trying to spin the narrative in their favor, refusing to acknowledge how deeply they had crossed a line. As the days passed, the frustration only grew. My dad, as usual, stayed quiet, allowing my mom to take the lead in their defense. While he remained passive, I knew he was just as complicit. Their unwillingness to accept any responsibility felt like a betrayal all over again. I wondered if this was how it would always be, my family, refusing to recognize the damage they had caused, forever trapped in their denial. Meanwhile, my sister remained in custody, and I learned more about the charges she was facing. Multiple counts of fraud and identity theft painted a grim picture. Each piece of news cut deeper. I didn't know the full extent of her crimes, but the more I uncovered, the more I realized how long this had been going on. Everything was so tangled, and the realization that she was potentially facing serious prison time was unsettling. Part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. After all, she was still my sister. But then the memories flooded back, the lies, the manipulation, the way she had consistently undermined me. It was a pattern, and now she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. While all of this went on, my fiancée became my rock. She was there for me every step of the way, always ready to listen as I vented my frustrations and fears. We spent long evenings talking about how to handle my family moving forward, going over every possible scenario. It became clear that cutting them out, at least for the foreseeable future, was the best option for our mental health. We needed to create a space free from the chaos they constantly brought into my life. But even that decision didn't come without its complications. One evening while we were having dinner, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, but something compelled me to answer. It turned out to be a family friend who had heard about the wedding incident and the situation with my sister. They expressed concern and urged me to reconsider my decision to cut ties with my family. Hearing that kind of pressure honestly made my stomach churn. It was as if the entire community was caught in the drama, and I suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable to their opinions. The following day, I received an unexpected visit from my parents. They showed up unannounced. I had hoped that giving them space would allow some of the tension to dissipate, but they seemed determined to confront me. My mom's face was a mask of indignation as she entered our home. She launched into a tirade about how we were being unreasonable, how I was supposed to forgive and forget. My dad remained silent, an observer of the chaos that was unfolding yet again. That confrontation spiraled into a heated argument. I tried to explain my perspective, to explain why their actions had been so harmful, but it felt like talking to a wall. They didn't want to hear it. Instead, my mom insisted that we should all be able to move on, as if everything could simply be brushed aside. It was exhausting, and I found myself fighting against their attempts to manipulate the narrative once more. As they left, I was so furious. How could they be so blind to the impact of their actions? In the following days, we made a conscious effort to shift our focus away from all this turmoil and to embrace the life we wanted to build together. We started planning a small getaway, something to celebrate our union away from the chaos. It was a much-needed distraction, a chance to reconnect without the constant reminders of my family's interference. Ultimately, the decision to step back from my family felt necessary, but it also left me with a sense of loss. I had hoped for a different kind of family experience, one where we supported each other instead of tearing each other down. Now, as I looked ahead, I realized that rebuilding my life meant learning to accept that my family might never be what I always wanted. It was a painful truth, but I knew it was the first step towards reclaiming my happiness. Update 2. It's been about a week since the wedding incident, and I'm still processing everything that happened. Each day feels like a mixed bag of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and a strange sense of freedom. I've come to the realization that my relationship with my parents is beyond repair, at least for now. After the wedding debacle, I thought they'd finally see the gravity of their actions. But no, they've doubled down, insisting that I overreacted and that calling the cops was too extreme. According to them, the family should never involve the police no matter what. I strongly disagree. The reality is that they have continuously crossed boundaries, and I refuse to accept their narrative any longer. During the last few days, my parents tried to rally extended family members to their side. I received a couple of calls from my aunts asking if there was any way I could mend things with my parents. I could feel the pressure building, the expectation that I should simply forgive and forget. But when I explained everything that went down, how they had shown up uninvited, how my sister's actions had led to a criminal investigation, they were horrified and took my side. It was a small victory, but I knew the battle was far from over. Most of my extended family is staying out of it, but there are a few who seem to think my parents are the victims here, which is ridiculous. I realize that some people will always side with family regardless of the facts. But this is not all. My fiancé and I made a significant decision to get married. It wasn't the big event we had originally planned. A considerable share of our budget had already gone into that now disrupted wedding, so we opted for something simple. We informed a few close friends and my partner's parents, keeping it intimate and meaningful. It felt right to take this step together to solidify our commitment in a way that felt genuine and free from the noise of my family's drama. On the day of our small ceremony, the atmosphere was surprisingly calm. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow over the garden where we exchanged our vows. It felt surreal standing there with my partner, the world around us fading into a blissful haze. I could see the joy in their eyes, and for that moment, nothing else mattered. We promised each other love, support, and understanding, vowing to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. It was a beautiful reminder that despite the chaos we had each other. However, the day wasn't without its complications. Just as we were wrapping up the ceremony, I received a message from one of my aunts. It turned out my parents were actively spreading rumors about us, painting a picture of me as the villain in the situation. They claimed that I had cut them off without reason and that I was ungrateful for everything they had done for me. The news hit me hard, but my wife reassured me that we were creating our own family, now one built on respect and love, not manipulation and guilt. As the days went by, we settled into married life, enjoying the little things, cooking together, watching movies, and dreaming about our future. But the specter of my family still loomed large. I was constantly bombarded with messages from my parents trying to guilt-trip me into seeing them. They even suggested my decision to marry without them was a betrayal, further proving their unwillingness to understand the damage they had caused. In the midst of this, I kept hearing updates about my sister. Her case was progressing, and from what I gathered, the evidence against her was pretty damning. It was heartbreaking to hear the details. She had manipulated so many people, leaving a trail of hurt in her wake. The reality of her situation weighed heavy on my mind. She was likely going to serve time, and part of me felt sadness at the loss of what could have been a better relationship. But ultimately, I reminded myself that I was done trying to fix things with people who didn't want to change. One evening, I received a call from one of my aunts, who had initially sided with my parents. She expressed concern for me, worried that I was being too quick in my judgment, telling me to see the bigger picture. I appreciated her concern, but it only reaffirmed my decision to distance myself. I explained how important it was for my mental health to prioritize my own happiness and to stop allowing my family's toxicity to dictate my life. I hung up feeling empowered, knowing I was choosing a better path for myself. As we moved forward in our new life as a married couple, I began to realize that while my family's actions were painful, they had also provided a clarity I hadn't had before. I was learning the importance of boundaries, the necessity of self-preservation, and the value of surrounding myself with people who truly supported me. My partner was my anchor through all of this, reminding me that we had a bright future ahead, one that didn't include the chaos of my past. Life was starting to feel more hopeful, but I knew I had to stay vigilant. The path to healing would be long, and while I may not have answers for everything, I was committed to carving out a space where I could thrive far from the shadows of my family's dysfunction. Update 3. It's been a few more days, and I think I'm finally ready to move on from this whole mess. My wife and I are focusing on our future together, and we've started planning a small getaway as our honeymoon to decompress after all the wedding drama. It feels good to have something positive to look forward to. I'm still getting occasional messages from my parents, but I stopped responding for a while. They made their choice, and I made mine. My sister's legal troubles are ongoing, and it looks like she'll be facing a significant amount of prison time. It's a strange feeling knowing that a member of my family is going to jail. But at the same time, I can't say I'm surprised. She's been walking a dangerous path for years, and this was bound to happen eventually. With all this weighing on me, I decided to have one final meeting with my parents. I didn't expect them to suddenly understand my side, but I wanted them to know that I was starting a new life. When we met, I could tell they were exhausted by the whole mess. My sister's mistakes had clearly taken a toll on them as well. They looked worn out, and it felt like they were carrying a heavy burden. We sat down in a quiet cafe, and I tried to explain my feelings. I talked about how their actions hurt me, how I couldn't keep living in that chaos. They didn't say much at first, just looked at me with tired eyes. I saw a hint of regret on their faces, but I knew they wouldn't fully admit it. They still held on to their beliefs about family, but I felt like we were all stuck in a loop, unable to break free. After a while, my mom spoke up, saying she wished things could go back to normal. I realized then that their idea of normal was very different from mine. I wanted a healthy relationship, one built on trust and respect, and I could see they were still stuck in their ways. As I left that meeting, I felt a mix of emotions. It was sad to see them in such a state, but I also felt a sense of relief. I had tried to reach out, and now I was ready to let go. In the end, I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and love. My parents and sister violated all those things, and while it's painful to cut ties, I know it's the right thing to do. My wife and I are building our own family now, one based on mutual respect and understanding, and that's all that matters. We're excited for our future together, free from the chaos of my past. For anyone else dealing with toxic family members, my advice is this: don't let guilt or obligation keep you in a harmful situation. You deserve peace and happiness, even if that means walking away from people who are supposed to love you. It's not easy, but sometimes it's the only way to protect yourself. As I look ahead, I feel hopeful. We're starting fresh, and for the first time in a long while, I can see a bright future waiting for us.